Like, she thinks she cute. She act too bougie. And I do. Fly, oh my.
Now, 3 suspects have been indicted in the fatal shooting of a pregnant woman. They are accused of the January killing of 34-year-old Tamisha Price. Take a look. According to court documents, a grand jury indicted Paris James and Jerry Scott on several counts of aggravated murder and felonious assault, among other charges. Chaita Triplet was also indicted on 2 third-degree felony counts of obstructing justice. All 3 suspects are accused of involvement in the homicide of Price, whose unborn child was also killed in the shooting. According to court documents, detectives say Scott did participate in the planning and execution of the plan that resulted in Price's death. Those documents also indicate that Triplet, who detectives said is James's live-in girlfriend, provided an alibi for James that was later proven to be false.
There's no pictures?
They film at home.
In the early morning hours of January 24, 2024, the stillness of South Toledo, Ohio, was shattered by a single gunshot. A small home on Norton Place turned into the scene of a double tragedy. Inside, 34-year-old Tamisha Price lay lifeless on her bedroom floor, just weeks away from delivering her 3rd child, her first daughter, Malaysia Leani Price. What began as a hopeful new chapter ended in bloodshed. Tamisha, a dedicated healthcare worker and single mother of 2 boys, had spent months excitedly preparing to welcome her baby girl. Her social media was filled with ultrasound images, nursery setups, and joyful anticipation. But someone wanted to stop that future from happening, and did. At the heart of the investigation was 27-year-old Paris James, believed to be Malaysia's biological father. What began as a seemingly normal relationship eventually collapsed under the pressure of distrust and denial. Paris, employed at a local factory, portrayed a stable lifestyle to those around him. But behind closed doors, a different side of him emerged. As Tamisha's pregnancy progressed, he became increasingly doubtful about being the father. Their conversations grew hostile. Arguments escalated. Tamisha stood firm in her claim that Malaysia was his child and even sought legal confirmation through a paternity test. But instead of waiting for the truth, authorities believe Paris made a fatal decision: to silence her. Paris didn't act alone. 2 other individuals became entangled in the deadly plan. Jerry Scott, 26, was accused of aiding in the execution of the crime. Then there was 34-year-old Chaita Triplet, Paris's girlfriend, who reportedly lied to law enforcement in an attempt to protect him. Triplet has been charged with obstruction of justice. Her legal team has since filed a motion to have her case separated from the trials of the 2 male suspects, asserting that her role was limited to misleading investigators.
There is a 3rd person charged in this case, Chaita Triplet. She's charged with obstructing justice. Her attorney says she will not be tried with the men.
I filed a motion to sever her case from the other 2 defendants on the basis she was just charged with 1 count of obstruction of justice, and I didn't want that case being tried. My case will be tried after the other 2 cases are tried.
Triplet is accused of lying to police about the whereabouts of Paris James.
Still, this trio, investigators say, formed a web of deception that ultimately ended with the deaths of both Tamisha and her unborn daughter. Surveillance footage, witness statements, and physical evidence all pointed toward a premeditated act. But in 2025, the case took a surprising twist. DNA from an unidentified male was discovered on the firearm used in the shooting. Whether this finding indicates another suspect or merely introduces confusion remains to be seen.
The attorneys for Paris James and Jerry Scott filed a motion saying they need to investigate the new evidence turned over to them by the prosecutor. According to these court documents filed this month, a piece of evidence in the case tested by BCI found another male's DNA on the murder weapon. It led prosecutors to investigate this person. James and Scott are accused of aggravated murder in the killing of Tamisha Price. They're accused of planning and executing the plan that resulted in the 34-year-old woman's death. Price was 9 months pregnant with James's child. Neither Price nor the baby girl she was carrying survived. The deadly shooting happened inside the woman's home last year.
Tamisha Price was more than the victim of a high-profile murder. She was a woman who lit up every room she entered. Born and raised in Toledo, she embodied the grit and heart of her city. Loved ones remembered her as magnetic, full of warmth, laughter, and purpose. Her true passion, however, was motherhood. Tamisha lived for her 2 sons. She attended their school events, helped with homework, and stood proudly on the sidelines of soccer games. She balanced parenting with her job in administrative support at a local medical center. Her co-workers described her as dependable, upbeat, and always ready with a kind word or helping hand. She worked hard not just to support her family, but to build a life of meaning. In 2023, Tamisha learned she was pregnant with her 3rd child. She named her daughter Malaysia before birth and began preparing to become a girl mom. Her online posts celebrated every milestone, from gender reveal moments to picking out tiny dresses. Her happiness was contagious. Friends and colleagues showered her with love. Just 2 weeks before her death, Tamisha's coworkers threw her a baby shower filled with pink decorations and heartfelt wishes. Her beaming face in those pictures reflected someone who was finally getting the daughter she had dreamed of. A friend recalled how excited she was. She talked about braiding Malaysia's hair, reading to her, raising a strong girl. Tamisha had every detail planned. But all those plans were cut short in a single horrifying moment. Tamisha wasn't just active at home or work. She was deeply invested in her community. She volunteered at her son's school, took part in local events, and never hesitated to help a neighbor in need. She was the kind of person who gave without expecting anything in return. Her job wasn't just a means to earn a living. She viewed it as a service. Patients remembered her for her warmth and attentiveness. She helped reduce the anxiety that often comes with doctor visits simply by being kind. In every area of her life, Tamisha showed up with grace, humility, and a deep sense of purpose. Despite the challenges of single motherhood, she never stopped believing in a better future. The relationship between Tamisha and Paris started out casually. They met through mutual acquaintances, and at first, things felt promising. Paris seemed mature, with steady employment and no obvious red flags. Tamisha saw potential. But when she became pregnant, the cracks started to show. Though Paris didn't outright deny being the father, he distanced himself emotionally. Tamisha attempted to reassure him, but the tension only grew. Text messages recovered after her death revealed just how strained things had become. In one message sent hours before she was killed, Tamisha wrote, "This is your daughter. Malaysia deserves her father." Still, Paris pushed back, claiming she was trying to trap him. As her due date approached, Tamisha turned to the legal system to confirm paternity and secure support for her daughter. She scheduled a DNA test to be completed after Malaysia's birth. To her, it wasn't about punishing Paris. It was about protecting her child's future. But according to police interviews with friends and family, Paris viewed that move as a threat. He allegedly grew increasingly resentful, telling others Tamisha was trying to ruin his life. That resentment, investigators believe, became motive. What began as a disagreement turned into a fatal conspiracy. Tamisha Price's story isn't just about how she died. It's about how she lived. She was a devoted mother, a beloved friend, a proud daughter, and a determined provider. Her life was built on service, love, and hope for a brighter future. Even in the face of adversity, she stayed true to her values. But on a cold January morning, her dreams for herself and her children were stolen. The baby clothes remain untouched. The crib stays empty. Her sons are left to grow up without the mother who meant everything to them. And the community she gave so much to now mourns the loss of a woman they can never replace. On the icy morning of January 24, 2024, the streets of South Toledo, Ohio, were silent until 4:48 a.m. when a gunshot fractured the stillness. Norton Place, typically a quiet residential block, had just become the scene of a double tragedy. Inside a single-story home, 34-year-old Tamisha Price, nearly full term in her pregnancy, lay fatally wounded in her bedroom. The daughter she was days away from meeting, Malaysia Leani Price, would never take her first breath. Tamisha had drifted off that night with dreams of welcoming her baby girl, but someone had other plans. The moment the shot rang out, panic spread through the neighborhood. A distressed 911 caller said the name that would soon dominate local headlines: Paris James. The implication was chilling and immediate. First responders rushed to the scene, the blue and red flashes of police cruisers bouncing off frozen windows. The officers approached the house cautiously, their footsteps crunching on frost. Inside, they discovered a horrifying sight. Tamisha was found on the bedroom floor, riddled with gunshots. Blood soaked the carpet, the walls, even the bedding. A nearby nursery, beautifully decorated in pink, remained untouched, eerily silent. Malaysia, still nestled in the womb, hadn't survived either. Despite efforts from paramedics, both were declared dead at the scene. Veteran officers struggled to process what they had just walked into. There was no evidence of forced entry. Nothing suggested robbery. The crime scene told a different story, one of rage and intent. Shell casings were scattered around the room. The shots had been deliberate and numerous. Whoever pulled the trigger didn't just want Tamisha silenced, they wanted her erased. The following day, Lucas County Coroner Dr. Diane Scala Barnett performed the autopsy. The report confirmed what police had already suspected. Tamisha had died from multiple gunshot wounds. Malaysia's death, too, was officially ruled a homicide, with maternal gunshot trauma as the cause. A separate death certificate was issued for the unborn child, a rare but powerful statement that both lives were lost in the act of violence. The autopsy also revealed Tamisha had been in good health. She had been preparing for her daughter's arrival. Her body showed signs of a mother ready to give birth. The tragedy wasn't just about death. It was about a stolen future. As investigators combed the scene, every detail mattered. Evidence was carefully cataloged, shells bagged, prints taken. Surveillance footage from nearby homes was pulled for review. A handgun was located near the residence, though police kept those details close. Eyewitness accounts added to the narrative. One neighbor reported hearing a man arguing outside Tamisha's home a few weeks prior. Another saw a car speeding away before sunrise. Then came the 911 call, the first major break. The caller named Paris James as the shooter. Authorities tracked James down within hours. During police questioning, he admitted to being at Tamisha's home that night. He acknowledged their ongoing dispute over paternity. He didn't believe Malaysia was his child and said he wanted no part in her life. That admission gave the case motive. But police needed more to make charges stick. Digging into his background, they discovered damning evidence. Surveillance video placed someone matching his build near Tamisha's house around the time of the shooting. Witnesses confirmed seeing James in the area. And crucially, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Tamisha had let him in, possibly unaware of his intent. Ballistics matched the shell casings to the recovered firearm. Everything pointed to a calculated act, not a spur-of-the-moment outburst, but a premeditated murder. What made the crime even more devastating was who Tamisha was. A Toledo native, she was a well-loved mother of 2 boys and worked in healthcare administration. Her colleagues described her as nurturing, always smiling, always dependable. Her social media chronicled her pregnancy journey, every ultrasound, every baby shower post, every dream she had for her daughter. Her community rallied around her with affection. Neighbors knew her as the mom who volunteered at school events, the woman who made time for everyone. She gave her children everything she had, and now both her life and her unborn daughters had been ripped away. The man at the center of this heartbreak, Paris James, was no stranger. He and Tamisha had begun a relationship the year before her pregnancy. They met through mutual friends and at first shared what seemed like a promising connection. But what Tamisha didn't know was that James was living with another woman, 34-year-old Chaita Triplet. As Tamisha's pregnancy progressed, James's dual life began to collapse. His support turned to resistance. He began distancing himself, expressing doubt about being the father. Text messages recovered later painted a picture of a man unraveling. He told friends, "She's trying to trap me," referring to Tamisha and the pregnancy. The more Tamisha stood her ground, demanding he take responsibility, the more agitated James became. Determined to prove the truth, Tamisha had filed for a court-ordered paternity test. Her final messages to James were not of anger, but of resolve. "This is your daughter," she wrote just hours before her death. "Malaysia deserves her father." Those words were a mother's plea for accountability, and they went unanswered. As Toledo mourned, investigators saw this case not as a domestic dispute, but as a planned execution rooted in denial and control. The lack of forced entry, the precision of the attack, and the weapon left behind all told a story. It was about silencing a woman who refused to back down, who insisted on truth for her unborn child. This wasn't just another homicide. It was a wake-up call about the dangers women face when demanding accountability. A child's life ended before it began, and a mother's voice was silenced before justice could be served. Jerry Scott, 26, emerged as the second person tied to the horrifying murder of Tamisha Price and her unborn daughter, Malaysia. While little is publicly known about his background, authorities believe Scott played a direct and disturbing role. Prosecutors allege that he wasn't just present, but an active participant, helping to orchestrate and carry out the killing. Court documents paint him as more than a passive figure. He was a co-conspirator. Whether he was a close associate of Paris James or a hired hand remains unclear, but his charges reflect serious involvement. Multiple counts of aggravated murder, aggravated burglary, felonious assault, and evidence tampering. His blank expression in his mugshot revealed nothing, only silence and unanswered questions about why he chose to take part in the killing of a pregnant woman. Then there's Chaita Triplet, 34, who played a very different but pivotal role in the days surrounding the murder. She lived with James and was under the impression that they were in a committed relationship. According to sources, she had no idea Tamisha even existed until word of the pregnancy reached her through a mutual connection. Instead of confronting James, Triplet began harassing Tamisha, sending her a barrage of threatening text messages. James had manipulated her, convincing her the pregnancy was a lie. After the murder, Triplet stepped in to protect James. When questioned by detectives, she provided a false alibi, claiming he had been with her the entire night of the murder. That lie didn't last long. Surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts quickly dismantled her story. Triplet was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice. Her lawyer argued that she wasn't a killer, just a woman caught in a web of manipulation. But her actions contributed to the delay in justice, adding more pain to an already grieving family. At the core of this tragedy was a familiar and deadly motive, the refusal to accept responsibility. For Paris James, the pregnancy meant consequences. A court-ordered DNA test would tie him to the child legally and financially. Child support, co-parenting obligations, a permanent bond to Tamisha. To him, that represented a loss of control. James wasn't simply uncertain, he was deliberately avoiding accountability. Tamisha's insistence on paternity, combined with his double life with Triplet, created a ticking time bomb. Investigators believe the mounting pressure is what ultimately led to murder. Tamisha and her unborn daughter became obstacles in James's path, and in his distorted logic, removing them was his only solution. Jerry Scott's exact motive remains murky. Was he acting out of loyalty to James? Was there money promised? No one knows for sure. But the nature of the charges, 5 counts of aggravated murder, 4 of murder, among others, indicates he was there at the house and played an integral role in what happened. Meanwhile, Triplet's decision to lie to police highlights how emotional manipulation can turn someone into an accessory to evil. The murder sent shockwaves across Toledo. Detectives arrived at Norton Place within minutes of the 911 call and quickly began gathering evidence. The scene itself provided crucial details: multiple shell casings, no sign of forced entry, and the calculated positioning of the shots all pointed to premeditation. The name, Paris James, mentioned by the caller, gave police their first lead. He was found within hours and brought in for questioning. During the interrogation, James admitted to being at Tamisha's home, but offered cold detachment when asked about her pregnancy. His refusal to claim Malaysia as his daughter helped provide motive, but detectives needed hard evidence to secure charges. Surveillance footage gathered from the neighborhood showed a man approaching Tamisha's home around the time of the murder. Neighbors confirmed seeing James in the area that night, contradicting his alibi. Tamisha's phone became a central piece of evidence, filled with emotional texts where she begged James to acknowledge his daughter. Hours before she was killed, she sent him one final message: "Malaysia deserves her father." His response? Silence. Text messages from Triplet were also recovered, dozens of them filled with anger and accusations toward Tamisha. When questioned, Triplet claimed James was home the entire night. That statement fell apart quickly, and she was arrested for obstruction. Her defense team claimed she had been deceived and manipulated, but her interference created more confusion and delay during the critical early hours of the investigation. The arrests followed in quick succession. James and Scott were taken into custody and held on $2 million bonds. Both were indicted on multiple charges, reflecting the murder of not one, but 2 victims. Triplet, facing a lesser charge, was granted bond but still held accountable. Prosecutors moved forward with confidence. The text messages, video evidence, eyewitness accounts, and James's own admission provided what seemed like a rock-solid case. But then came a stunning twist. In early 2025, while the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation processed the murder weapon, they made a startling discovery: male DNA that didn't belong to James or Scott. The revelation sent the case into a tailspin. Could there be a third suspect who had slipped under the radar? Or was the DNA unrelated, a remnant from a prior owner of the weapon? The prosecution insisted that the DNA didn't change the core of the case. They maintained that James and Scott were still the ones responsible, pointing to the digital footprint, witness testimonies, and physical evidence that tied both men to the crime. But defense attorneys seized the opportunity, arguing the DNA introduced reasonable doubt. They filed motions for delay, demanding the identity behind the DNA be discovered before trial. The unexpected twist forced the court to pause proceedings while the state launched a secondary investigation to track down the unidentified male. For Tamisha's family, the revelation brought only more heartache. What had felt like a clear path to justice was suddenly clouded. Questions piled up. Was someone else involved? Was James protecting a third person? Or was the DNA simply a distraction? As the investigation continues, the community remains on edge. What started as a devastating but seemingly straightforward case has evolved into something much more complex, layered with lies, betrayal, and a new mystery yet to be solved. Toledo, Ohio, home to over 270,000 residents, found itself at the center of a case more complicated than most in its recent history. A pregnant mother and her unborn child were gunned down in what prosecutors describe as a calculated execution. The city now finds itself torn. With DNA from an unknown man found on the murder weapon, the community is asking, have the right people been charged, or is someone else still out there? As of May 2025, the tragic deaths of Tamisha Price and her unborn daughter Malaysia remain unresolved. The prime suspects, Paris James and Jerry Scott, remain jailed, each held on a $2 million bond. Their list of charges is lengthy and severe: 5 counts of aggravated murder, 4 counts of murder, felonious assault, burglary, and tampering with evidence. Originally set for trial in early 2025, the proceedings were postponed after the discovery of male DNA that didn't match either man. The defense seized this opportunity, suggesting it could point to another killer. The prosecution, however, insists the DNA is just one piece in a larger puzzle, and not enough to erase the overwhelming evidence linking James and Scott to the murders. Meanwhile, Chaita Triplet, James's live-in girlfriend, took a different legal route. Accused of giving police a false alibi to protect James, she was charged with obstruction of justice. Her case was separated from the murder trial, with her lawyer arguing she was misled and not directly involved in the killings. Her upcoming trial will explore how far deception can go and what accountability should look like for those who enable it. At the heart of the devastation is Tamisha's grieving family. Her 2 young sons are now being raised by relatives. Her uncle, Terry Price, spoke emotionally days after the crime, calling her a devoted mom and a kind-hearted woman. Her mother, in a rare interview, described Tamisha as a fighter, a nurturer, and a light to everyone who knew her. The family attends every court date, wearing buttons with Tamisha's and Malaysia's names as a silent call for justice. The murders shocked a tight-knit community. Norton Place, once a quiet street, became a public memorial site. Candles, flowers, and handwritten notes lined the sidewalk. Vigils were held, fundraisers organized, and advocates called for more protections for pregnant women, especially those facing domestic threats. Tamisha's death revealed a grim reality. Pregnancy can make women more vulnerable to violence. This tragedy must serve as more than just a headline. It must be a turning point. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Like and share this video. Also, subscribe to True Crimes Venue and help us demand justice for Tamisha and Malaysia. For more haunting true crime cases, explore our well-curated playlist linked in the description. Thank you, and see you in our next video.